I strode into the Tech Vanguard Gala, ready to close the deal of my career, but one dismissive gesture would cost me everything. The woman I coldly brushed aside as non-essential personnel was about to become my new boss. The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and ambition. It was the annual Tech Vanguard Gala, a place where fortunes were made and careers were forged in the crucible of a single handshake. For me, Mark Chen, Senior Vice President of Acquisitions at a mid-tier tech firm, this was the night. This was my Super Bowl. For 6 months I had been courting Kenji Nakamura, the legendary founder of a Japanese AI startup that was poised to change the world. Landing this deal wasn't just a win. It was my ticket to the C-suite. My boss, David, had made that explicitly clear. "Close Nakamura," he'd said, clapping me on the shoulder earlier that evening, "and you can start measuring my office for new drapes." I was on edge, my senses sharp. I scanned the room, a sea of tailored suits and glittering dresses, my eyes searching for Nakamura's distinct silver hair. I'd spent the last hour schmoozing, making small talk with people who mattered and artfully dodging those who didn't. My entire being was a coiled spring, ready to launch into the pitch of my life. And then I saw him. He was standing near the towering ice sculpture of a microchip, deep in conversation with a woman. From across the room she was just a silhouette. As I got closer, I took her in. She was tall, impeccably dressed in a simple but elegant deep blue gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. She was black, with her hair styled in a way that was both sophisticated and commanding. I registered her appearance in a fraction of a second, the way you register a waiter or an event planner. My mind, already running 1,000 calculations about profit margins and integration strategies, filed her under non-essential personnel. A guest of Nakamura's, maybe? An assistant? It didn't matter. My target was Nakamura, and he was finally free. I strode over, a confident smile plastered on my face. I timed my approach perfectly, waiting for a slight lull in their conversation. "Mr. Nakamura," I boomed, extending my hand. "A pleasure to see you again. Mark Chen." Nakamura's face lit up. "Ah, Chen-san. Excellent. I was just discussing the potential for cross-platform synergy." He turned to the woman beside him. "Mark, I must introduce you. This is—" But I wasn't listening. My focus was a laser beam fixed on my goal. I saw the deal, the promotion, the corner office. This woman, whoever she was a distraction. A polite but firm interruption was necessary. I gave her a curt nod, a dismissive little dip of the head that I reserved for coat-check girls and valets, and turned my body slightly, angling her out of the conversation. I kept my hand extended towards Nakamura, a clear signal that my business was with him and him alone. The woman didn't flinch. Instead, with a quiet grace that I would later recognize as terrifying poise, she extended her own hand. Not to me, but into the space between the three of us, a clear and deliberate offer. Nakamura, ever the gentleman, paused, his own hand still halfway to mine, looking from her to me, expecting me to complete the triangle. And I just didn't. I looked at her outstretched hand, then back at her face. My mind screamed at me. Who has time for this? This is the most important conversation of my career, and I have to shake hands with the help. I gave a tight, impatient smile. "Perhaps later," I said, my voice dripping with a condescension I didn't even try to hide. "Mr. Nakamura and I have some rather pressing matters to discuss." I let my own hand drop, a final, clear dismissal. A silence fell over our small circle. It was only a second, maybe two, but it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Nakamura's smile vanished. He slowly retracted his hand, his eyes wide with something I couldn't quite place. Shock? Disbelief? The woman's expression, however, was perfectly, chillingly neutral. She held her hand in the air for another beat, then slowly, deliberately, lowered it. She looked at me, her eyes sweeping over my face, not with anger, but with the detached curiosity of a scientist examining a specimen under a microscope. "I see," she said. Her voice low and even, yet it cut through the ballroom's chatter like a shard of glass. "You are absolutely right, Mr. Chen. We can discuss it later." She then turned to Nakamura, her entire demeanor shifting back to one of warmth and collegial respect. Kenji, my apologies. I have another engagement to see to. We will finalize the paperwork in the morning." She gave him a small, knowing smile, touched his arm briefly, and then turned and walked away. I felt a surge of triumph. I had successfully cleared the obstacle. Now it was just me and Nakamura. "So," I began, turning back to him, ready to launch into my pitch. But the man in front of me was a stranger. His face was a mask of cold fury. He looked at me, truly looked at me, as if for the first time, and I saw the multi-million-dollar deal I had spent half a year building evaporate before my very eyes. "Chen-san," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "you have just made a grave error." He turned on his heel and walked away, leaving me standing alone by the melting ice sculpture. I stood there, stunned, my heart pounding in my chest. What just happened? It was an awkward moment, sure, but a grave error. I tried to shake it off. I was just flustered. I'd find him later, apologize for what? For being efficient. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from David. "My office. Now." Another buzz. A calendar notification. "Meeting. Nakamura deal. Post-mortem. 7 a.m. Buzz. An email from HR. Subject. Urgent. Your employment status. My blood ran cold. I looked up and saw my boss, David, storming towards me from across the ballroom. His face was pale, ashen, like he'd just seen a ghost. He didn't even stop walking as he grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" he hissed, his voice trembling with a rage I had never witnessed. That wasn't Nakamura's assistant. That wasn't his guest. He leaned in closer, his eyes wild. That was Alani Thorne, the founder and CEO of Thorne Industries. He paused, letting the name hang in the air, but it meant nothing to me. I just stared at him, confused. David saw my blank expression and his face crumpled in despair. "Mark," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Thorne Industries. They finalized their acquisition of our company this afternoon. She's not just a CEO. As of 5 o'clock today, she is your new boss." The words hit me like a physical blow. Your new boss. My mind reeled, trying to process the catastrophic scale of my miscalculation. The bustling ballroom noise faded into a dull roar. The champagne on my breath turned to ash. David's grip on my arm was the only thing keeping me upright as he practically dragged me through the crowd. Faces turned as we passed. I saw the whispers, the smirks, the looks of pity that were somehow even worse. I was no longer Mark Chen, the rising star. I was a spectacle, a cautionary tale being born in real time. The cold night air of the parking garage did little to clear my head. David shoved me towards his car, his face a mask of incandescent rage. "Get in," he snarled. The drive back to the office was a blur of streetlights and David's voice, each word a hammer blow against the wreckage of my career. "Do you have any idea who she is?" he yelled, swerving around a taxi. "Alani Thorne isn't just some CEO, Mark. She's a titan. She built her empire from the ground up on two things: being smarter than everyone else and demanding basic human decency. You failed on both counts tonight." He slammed his palm against the steering wheel. The acquisition was top secret, codename Project Atlas. The final confirmation email went out to senior VPs at 6 p.m., an hour before the gala. You were supposed to read it. You were supposed to know who you were meeting tonight. Of course, I'd seen the email notification. But I'd been in the zone, psyching myself up, running through my pitch for Nakamura. I'd swiped it away without a second thought, dismissing it as just another corporate bulletin. "And Nakamura?" David laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You think you were courting him? He sits on her board of directors. They've been friends for 20 years. He wasn't there for you to pitch to him. He was there to make the introduction for her. You didn't just insult your new boss, you idiot. You insulted her closest advisor while trying to sell her a company she was already in the process of buying. The layers of my blunder were a labyrinth of professional suicide. I had walked into the most important moment of my life, utterly blind, and set myself on fire. The rest of the drive was silent. There was nothing left to say. David dropped me at my car and just drove off, not even a parting glare. I don't remember driving home. When I stumbled into my apartment, I collapsed onto the sofa, the suit I'd worn with so much pride, now feeling like a shroud. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling as I typed her name, Alanithorne. The search results flooded the screen. Forbes covers. Time's 100 most influential people, keynote speeches at Davos, pictures of her with presidents, with tech visionaries, with philanthropists. She wasn't just in the club, she had built the damn clubhouse. I clicked on an interview with a major business journal. I scanned the text, my eyes snagging on a quote. "My business philosophy is simple," she was quoted as saying. "I invest in people. And character isn't what you do when the spotlight is on you. It's what you do when you think no one important is watching." The words burned into my retinas. She hadn't just seen my actions, she had seen right through me. Sleep was impossible. I spent the night in a cold sweat, replaying that single, catastrophic moment. The dismissive nod, the condescending tone, the hand left hanging in the air. At 6 a.m. I got up and put on a fresh suit. It felt like dressing for my own funeral. The walk into the office was a gauntlet of averted eyes and sudden, hushed conversations that stopped the moment I rounded a corner. The entire building already knew. I was a ghost. I knocked on David's door at 7 a.m. sharp. "Come in," he said, his voice weary. He was sitting at his desk, looking like he hadn't slept either. But he wasn't alone. On the massive 80-inch monitor behind him was a live video feed of a pristine, minimalist office. And in the center of the screen, sitting perfectly poised, was Alani Thorne. She was wearing a crisp white blazer, her expression as calm and unreadable as it had been in the ballroom. She wasn't looking at David. Her eyes were locked on me. "Mr. Chen," she said. Her voice, crystal clear through the speakers, filled the room. There was no anger in it, no emotion at all. It was the voice of a judge about to pass sentence. "Please have a seat. David, you may go." David practically fled the room, closing the door softly behind him. It was just me and the most powerful woman I had ever met. "I trust you've had some time to reflect on the events of last night," she began, her gaze unwavering. I opened my mouth to apologize, to beg, to explain, but she held up a single finger, silencing me instantly. "I'm not interested in apologies, Mr. Chen. Apologies are for mistakes. What you displayed was not a mistake. It was a choice, a reflection of your character." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "I've spent the morning reviewing your file," she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "You're ambitious, aggressive. You deliver results. But your management style is abrasive. You have a history of dismissing junior colleagues, taking credit for their ideas, and creating a toxic environment for those you deem unimportant. Last night was not an anomaly. It was a pattern. This was it. The final nail in the coffin. So I'm fired," I whispered, the words tasting like defeat. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of her lips. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. "Fired? Mr. Chen? That would be far too easy," she said softly. "That would allow you to walk away, to spin this story, to land on your feet somewhere else. No, you're not fired. You're being reassigned. The Nakamura deal, the one you were so eager to discuss. Thorne Industries is green-lighting it, and you're going to see it through, from start to finish. You will ensure it is a complete and total success." A tiny, insane spark of hope ignited in my chest. Was this a test? A second chance? "Thank you," I breathed. "Thank you, Miss Thorne. You won't regret—" "I'm not finished," she cut in, her voice hardening just enough to turn my blood to ice. "You won't be leading the project. You won't even be on the acquisitions team. Your new title, effective immediately, is Junior Project Assistant. You will handle scheduling, you will take notes, you will fetch coffee, and you will do anything and everything the new project lead requires of you. You will be, for all intents and purposes, her personal assistant." Her eyes flicked to a point just off camera. "You can come in now," she said. The door to David's office opened. I turned in my chair, my heart pounding, expecting to see some corporate hatchet man, some ruthless executive she'd brought in to make my life a living hell. But it wasn't a man. It was a young woman, Priya Sharma, a brilliant analyst from my old department, a woman whose innovative market entry strategy I had publicly ridiculed in a team meeting 6 months ago, before quietly rebranding it and presenting it as my own. A woman I had personally blocked for a promotion because, as I'd told David, she just didn't have the killer instinct. She walked in, took one look at my stunned face, and gave a small, sharp smile. "Hello, Mark," she said, her voice full of an authority I had refused to see. "I'll take a latte, no sugar." The world tilted on its axis. Priya Sharma, standing there in my boss's office, looking at me with the cool confidence of a commander surveying a conquered territory. And Alani Thorne on the screen behind her, a silent, all-powerful arbiter who had just handed Priya the sword to end me. My mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no sound came out. A latte. She wanted me to get her a latte. 6 months ago, she was preparing slide decks for me. She was the one fetching coffee. "Mark?" Priya's voice was sharp, pulling me from my stupor. "Did you hear me? A latte. From the cafe down the street, not the sludge in the break room. And be quick about it. Our first team briefing is in 15 minutes. On the screen, Alani Thorne's face remained impassive, but I could feel her watching, dissecting my every reaction. This was the test. Not a path to redemption, but the first trial in my personal purgatory. My pride, the very engine that had propelled my entire career, was screaming. It told me to stand up, to tell them both where they could shove their coffee, to walk out with my head held high. But where would I go? The name Alani Thorne carried weight. The story of my spectacular self-immolation would be the hot gossip at every major firm by lunchtime. I was radioactive. Walking out wasn't just quitting a job. It was quitting my career. So I did the only thing I could. I swallowed. The lump of pride in my throat was jagged and painful. "Yes, of course," I managed to croak out. "A latte, no sugar, coming right up." I stood, avoiding Priya's triumphant gaze and the chillingly neutral stare from the monitor, and walked out of the office. The walk to the elevator felt a mile long. Every head turned as I passed. The whispers were louder now, laced with undisguised schadenfreude. I was no longer the shark. I was the chum. In the elevator I finally looked at my reflection. The man staring back was a stranger, hollow-eyed, defeated, pathetic. I ripped off my tie, stuffing it into my pocket, my fingers fumbling with the button. The next few weeks were a masterclass in humiliation. My spacious office was gone, replaced by a tiny windowless cubicle right outside Priya's new corner office, my old office. My nameplate, Mark Chen, Senior Vice President, was replaced with a printed piece of paper that simply read, Project Assistant. My duties were as demeaning as Thorne had promised. I scheduled Priya's meetings. I screen-printed her documents. I made her travel arrangements. And yes, every morning my first task was to fetch her a latte, no sugar, from the cafe down the street. Priya, for her part, wielded her newfound power with surgical precision. She never raised her voice. She was never overtly cruel. Instead, she killed me with 1,000 cuts of professional competence. She would ask for my input in meetings, wait for me to voice an opinion, then calmly and systematically dismantle my logic in front of the entire team, often using data from reports she knew I hadn't been given access to. She would CC me on emails where my former subordinates praised her visionary leadership, a leadership built on the very ideas she'd once brought to me, the ideas I had stolen. The Nakamura deal was my life's work, and now I was watching it flourish from the sidelines, a ghost haunting my own success. I knew the integration strategy inside and out. I knew the potential pitfalls, the key personnel to placate. But my role was to sit in the back of the room and take notes while Priya led the charge, flawlessly navigating the very path I had laid. The worst part was Mr. Nakamura. He would join the weekly progress calls via video link. He never addressed me directly. He would speak only to Priya, praising her insight and her command of the details. But every so often his eyes would drift on the screen to where I was sitting in the background. There was no anger in his gaze anymore, just a profound, unshakable disappointment that felt infinitely worse. He was seeing exactly what Alani Thorne had wanted him to see, that the brilliant, aggressive dealmaker he'd admired was nothing more than a hollow suit, propped up by the unrecognized labor of others. I was breaking. The constant, grinding humiliation was wearing me down to a nub. I was losing weight. I stopped sleeping. My life became a cycle of lattes, spreadsheets, and barely veiled contempt. One evening, working late to collate Priya's expense reports, I finally hit my limit. I was staring at a receipt for a lavish dinner she'd had with Nakamura's team. A dinner I should have been leading, and something inside me snapped. I stood up, stormed into her office, and threw the folder down on her desk. "What is the point of this?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a month's worth of repressed fury. "You've won. Thorne has won. You've humiliated me. You've taken my job. You've ruined my reputation. Isn't that enough? Why are you dragging this out?" Priya looked up from her computer, her expression uncharacteristically serious. She leaned back in her chair, my chair, and steepled her fingers. "You still don't get it, do you, Mark?" she said quietly. "You think this is about revenge? About punishing you?" "What else could it be?" I shot back. "This is about the work," she said, her voice firm. "This deal, this company, it's important. It's bigger than your pride or my satisfaction." "But Alani Thorne couldn't trust it to you. Not because you're incompetent, you're a brilliant strategist. She couldn't trust you because you're a liability. Your character is a liability. You cut corners, you step on people, you see them as tools or obstacles, not collaborators. That's a rot that can kill a company from the inside. She isn't punishing you, Mark. She's teaching you." "Teaching me what?" I scoffed. "How to be a glorified secretary?" "No," Priya said, leaning forward. "She's teaching you what it's like to be invisible, to have your work ignored, your presence dismissed. She's giving you the exact same experience you gave me, and countless others, for years." She picked up a pen and pointed it at me. "The real question is, are you learning anything?" Her words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Before I could respond, her desk phone buzzed. She answered, her demeanor shifting back to pure business. "Priya Sharma." She listened for a moment, her brow furrowing. "Yes, he's here." She listened again, her eyes widening slightly. "I understand. We're on our way." She hung up the phone and looked at me, all traces of our confrontation gone, replaced by a sudden, urgent gravity. "That was Alani Thorne's chief of staff," she said, standing up and grabbing her blazer. "There's a problem, a big one. The server farm in Osaka that houses all of Nakamura's proprietary AI code just went down. A complete system failure." I felt a jolt of ice water in my veins. That server farm was the heart of the entire deal. Without that code, the company was worthless. "What happened?" Priya was already moving towards the door, grabbing her keys. "They don't know. But the lead engineer, the only one who can manually reboot the system and restore the backups, quit 2 weeks ago. He's gone off-grid somewhere in rural Japan. Nobody can find him." She paused at the door and looked back at me, her face pale. "His name is Kenji Tanaka. He was your lead analyst for 3 years, Mark. According to his exit interview, he quit because of persistent and unmanageable workplace hostility from his direct supervisor. He named you." The accusation landed with the force of a physical impact. Kenji Tanaka. I remembered him. Quiet, brilliant, a coding prodigy who worked tirelessly in the background. I also remembered him being sensitive. I'd ridden him hard, dismissing his concerns about server overload as whining and publicly berating him for a minor coding error that had delayed a report by a few hours. I saw him as a cog in the machine, and when cogs got squeaky, you applied pressure until they quieted down. Now, that cog had brought the entire multi-billion-dollar machine to a grinding halt. Because of me. "We're booked on the first flight to Tokyo," Priya said, her voice a clipped, efficient command that belied the panic in her eyes. "Ms. Thorne is arranging a charter. We have less than 24 hours to find Tanaka and get that system back online before the data loss becomes permanent and Nakamura's board pulls the plug." The next few hours were a whirlwind. We were whisked to a private airfield and onto a sleek Thorne Industries jet. The lavish interior was wasted on us. Priya was a storm of activity, coordinating with teams in Tokyo and the U.S., her laptop and phone a constant blur of communication. I, on the other hand, was useless. My role was relegated to a silent observer, the architect of the very crisis we were flying to solve. For the first time stripped of my title, my office, and my authority, I was forced to confront the wreckage I'd left in my wake. It wasn't just about Priya. It was about Kenji Tanaka. I had never considered the human cost of my ambition. I saw his face in my mind's eye, a quiet man who loved his work, a man I had systematically broken down until his only option was to flee. The shame was a physical weight pressing down on my chest. When we landed in Tokyo, Priya had a lead. Tanaka's family owned a small inn in Hakone, a mountainous town known for its hot springs. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. A car was waiting, and we began the tense, winding drive into the mountains. "What's the plan?" I finally asked, breaking the hours-long silence. "What you going to say to him?" Priya didn't look at me. She stared out the window at the dense green forests rushing by. "I don't know, Mark. I'll offer him whatever he wants. A new contract, triple the salary, a signing bonus, whatever it takes." "It won't work," I said quietly. She finally turned to me, her eyes flashing with frustration. "And what do you suggest? You know him better than anyone." The irony of her statement was a bitter pill. I knew him, but I had never bothered to know him. But Priya was right about one thing. Throwing money at this problem wouldn't fix it. The wound I'd inflicted was personal, not financial. "He's not coming back for you," I said, the realization solidifying in my mind. "He's not coming back for Thorn Industries, and he's sure as hell not coming back for money." My voice was barely a whisper. "The only person he might listen to is me." Priya stared at me, her expression a mixture of disbelief and desperation. This was it. The entire deal, my career, her career, it all rested on this. She gave a single, sharp nod. We found the inn nestled in a quiet valley. It was a traditional ryokan, beautiful and serene. An elderly woman directed us to a small garden in the back. And there he was, Kenji Tanaka, dressed in simple work clothes, kneeling on the ground, meticulously tending to a small bonsai tree. He looked up as we approached, and when he saw me, his face hardened. All the warmth left his eyes, replaced by a cold, guarded pain. Priya started to speak, but I held up a hand, stopping her. I walked forward alone, stopping a few feet from him. The air was thick with unspoken history. "Tanaka-san," I began, my voice unsteady. I had 100 excuses, 1,000 justifications, but looking at him now, they all turned to dust in my mouth. There was only one thing to say. "I am sorry." He said nothing, just continued to prune a tiny branch on the bonsai. "I was a terrible boss," I continued, the words raw and difficult. "I was arrogant. I was cruel. I took your talent for granted, and I dismissed you as a person. There is no excuse for my behavior. I pushed you, I broke your spirit, and I am profoundly, deeply sorry for the damage I caused. I didn't come here to ask you to fix the servers. I came here to ask for your forgiveness." I bowed, a deep, formal bow, holding it until my back ached. When I finally straightened, Tanaka had stopped his work. He was looking at me, really looking at me, and for the first time, the icy shield in his eyes began to thaw. "The server backups," he said, his voice rusty from disuse. "They are not on the main network. I created a tertiary, isolated cold storage unit. It's a security measure I proposed. You called it a waste of resources." My heart leaped. He hadn't just quit. He had protected his work, even from me. "Can you restore it?" I asked, daring to hope. He nodded slowly. "From my home terminal. Yes." The relief that washed over me was so intense my knees felt weak. Priya let out a breath she'd clearly been holding for the entire flight. We spent the next hour at his small house while he worked his magic. With a few dozen keystrokes, he brought the entire system back online. The crisis was averted. The deal was saved. On the flight back, a message came through from Alani Thorne. She wanted a full debriefing the moment we landed. When we walked into the video conference room, she was on the screen, just as before. Priya gave a concise, brilliant summary of the events, giving full credit to Tanaka for his foresight. Thorne listened intently, nodding. Then she turned her gaze to me. "And you, Mr. Chen, what is your assessment?" This was my final test. I took a deep breath. "My assessment, Miss Thorne, is that I failed. I failed as a leader, and I failed the company. I drove away one of our most valuable assets through my own arrogance. The only reason we succeeded today was because Kenji Tanaka is a better man than I am, and because Priya Sharma is a better leader than I ever was. I don't deserve a place here." I looked directly into the camera. "I tender my resignation, effective immediately." A long silence followed. Priya looked shocked. Alani Thorne just watched me, her expression unreadable. Finally she spoke. "Resignation denied, Mr. Chen." I stared at the screen, bewildered. "Last night, on the way to the airport, I authorized Priya to offer you a severance package and accept your resignation the moment Tanaka refused to help," she said. "Your job was forfeit, but you did something I didn't expect. You took responsibility. You showed humility. You put the needs of the company and the dignity of another person before your own pride. It seems you have finally started to learn the lesson I intended." She paused. "The junior project assistant position is dissolved. Priya needs a deputy to help manage the integration with Nakamura's company. Someone who knows the technical and financial details inside and out. The position is deputy director. It reports directly to her. The job is yours, if you want it." I was speechless. It wasn't my old job. It wasn't the glory I had chased. It was a subordinate role. But it was also a beginning, a real one. I looked at Priya. She was smiling, a genuine, unguarded smile. "I accept," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Miss Thorne." "Don't thank me," she replied, a hint of warmth finally entering her voice. "Thank Mr. Tanaka. I've just approved his new contract. He's been promoted to Chief Systems Architect for the entire division. He asked for one condition, that you personally approve his expense reports every week. He said it would help you both remember the importance of details." And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I laughed. It was a real laugh, free from the weight of ambition and ego. I was no longer the star. I was part of a team. And I knew, standing there in that conference room, that my career hadn't ended in that ballroom. It had just truly begun.